The most destructive deception ever imposed upon you claims that goodness equals liberation. Yet reality reveals that what you label as moral excellence often serves as an elaborate system of compliance. From your earliest years, you've been molded for approval. Recognition came when you surrendered, consequences followed when you dared express authenticity. Education taught you that righteousness means self-sacrifice, maintaining silence, and personal erasure. That nobility involved servitude, suppressing your truth, and maintaining submission while calling it modesty. Through time, you've learned to find satisfaction in this pattern, labeling cowardice as character and your inability to refuse as compassion. The world cherishes the compliant. Society honors rule followers, adapters, and those who echo established patterns. Yet it despises and dreads individuals bold enough to forge their own direction, which explains why Nietzsche creates such disturbance. He offers no consolation. He casts you into the void. Rather than dictating correctness, he compels you to examine why you believe something is right. Reading Zarathustra transcends studying a philosophy textbook. You're encountering a voice that incinerates everything you believed about virtue, morality, and sacrifice. This message constitutes confrontation, a reflection you might prefer avoiding but absolutely require. Should you exist attempting to embody goodness, you might be living a charade. You may have adapted so thoroughly to others' demands that you've forgotten your genuine identity. This isn't advocacy for crude selfishness or glorification of arrogance. This concerns something far more profound: authenticity, authority, and living from your core rather than from external expectations. When Nietzsche proclaimed God's death, he wasn't engaging in theatrical provocation or seeking to offend the religious through manufactured controversy. He announced the collapse of an entire belief framework that had sustained Western civilization for centuries. Divine death doesn't address the existence or non-existence of a supreme being. It concerns the crumbling of absolute truths, unquestionable commandments, and inherited, unchosen moral codes. It marks the end of believing life possesses prefabricated meaning. What persists when everything collapses? Chaos, emptiness, vertigo from realizing no ready-made structure exists to follow, no fixed, eternal good or evil guaranteed by divine authority. Within this abyss, Nietzsche plants seeds of new possibility, the emergence of the Übermensch. The Übermensch isn't a superhero or dictator, but someone who has transcended herd morality, no longer requiring external guidance because they've become their own value creator. They don't seek approval or expect life to provide ready-made meaning, they construct that meaning internally. This individual doesn't bow to tradition but also doesn't rebel through childish impulse. They simply don't belong to the ordinary world. Nietzsche viewed humanity as a bridge between animal and Übermensch, with many tragically settling midway. They cling to pre-made doctrines, become prisoners of inherited concepts, live seeking to fit into a world rewarding conformity while punishing authenticity. The Übermensch's birth proves painful because it demands destruction, burning everything old and accepted without questioning. There exists virtue that isn't noble, despite such presentation. This is virtue that demands, charges, and paralyzes you with the notion that constant self-sacrifice is required, that you must prove your goodness, demonstrate usefulness, humility, and submission. It disguises itself as altruism while intoxicated with vanity. It makes you agree when you ought to refuse. It transforms you into a martyr, then demands pride in that role. Nietzsche clearly recognized this trap. Supposed virtue is a social construct designed to domesticate individuals. This morality type wasn't created to liberate human spirit but to keep it chained. It emerges from weak individuals' resentment, those lacking strength to assert their will, who then invent morality to condemn the strong. Notice how the good live in constant judgment. They're always ready to point fingers. They smile externally while internally hoping for your failure, because demanding virtue cannot tolerate others' freedom. It feeds on control, recognition, and guilt. Most cruelly, this virtue often lives within you. How often have you felt guilty for establishing boundaries? How frequently have you restrained your most authentic impulses from fear of appearing selfish? How many times have you negated yourself believing this was correct? This is demanding virtue, forcing you to live outwardly, never inwardly. It measures human value by utility to others, never by fidelity to oneself. Nietzsche called this slave morality, a value system created by those unable to bear the strong's freedom. Chapter 22 of Thus Spoke Zarathustra delivers not instruction but revelation. Of the virtue that gives isn't merely traditional morality critique, it's an independence declaration, a complete break from everything labeled virtue that actually conceals fear, dependence, and approval-seeking. Zarathustra reaches his pinnacle, like a prophet preaching transformation rather than salvation, revealing what he considers existence as only worthy virtue, the one that gives. But it doesn't give from command, guilt, or recognition-seeking. It gives because it overflows, because it's full, because it cannot contain its strength. Nietzsche tells us authentic virtue emerges from abundance, changing everything. While traditional morality bases itself on lack, what you cannot do, what you must do, what you're missing, giving virtue arises from excess. It's a flow, a natural spilling of the elevated soul. Zarathustra compares this virtue to the sun. The sun doesn't choose whom to shine upon, doesn't request thanks, doesn't expect returns. It simply shines because that's its nature. Nietzsche proposes that humans, upon reaching inner power, no longer need roles. They act from essence. They give because they're free. Freedom here isn't doing whatever you want, it's not needing approval to do what must be done. Then comes sharp critique. You venerate your virtue cup as if it were life's chalice, and its content corrupts you. Nietzsche addresses you, me, all of us, saying what we call virtue often constitutes disguised pride, desperate attempts to appear pure, good, moral in others' eyes. But internally, it's poisoned with vanity, fear, and control. Giving virtue, conversely, doesn't want to convince anyone. It doesn't need self-justification or defense because it doesn't arise from need, it emerges from a spirit's overflow that can no longer contain itself. No virtue, regardless of authenticity, escapes life's cycle. Everything living dies, everything blooming withers, and Nietzsche, unlike many thinkers, doesn't shield you from this reality. He throws you into it without cushions or anesthesia, because there, in accepting impermanence, true freedom begins. Zarathustra, after giving everything, understands even his virtue must die. There's no sadness, no despair, only beauty, acceptance, wisdom. The genuine creator knows when to start, understanding even giving needs pause, even the sun sets. Nietzsche doesn't want you living eternally in blind giving. He wants you learning to dance with existence, knowing how to shine when full but also when to withdraw when necessary. The giving being also needs renewal, return to source, symbolic death to be reborn with greater strength, clarity, truth. This cycle isn't weakness, it's ritual, sacred movement. The creator isn't the world's servant, doesn't live giving until fading away. They give because they're whole. But when beginning to empty, they retreat, silence themselves, disappear, understanding that excessive giving becomes contaminated, addiction, attachment, needing to be needed. Zarathustra falls silent. His silence screams freedom, maturity, detachment. After giving everything, he chooses departure, not from weakness but because he knows even light needs dimming to shine with full force again. This gesture, this voluntary withdrawal, speaks more about strength than any power display. Nietzsche understood a truth few can bear facing. Nobody can sustain infinite giving without internal death. Souls offering too much without pause, silence, or source return end up dry, bitter, resentful. Therefore, authentic creators know when to withdraw. They don't need stages or audiences, they need connection to their own source, accessible only in silence. Our culture fears emptiness, is disgusted by silence, values noise, performance, exhibitionism. The world wants you always present, available, giving. If you fall silent, you're forgotten. If you withdraw, you're judged. If you preserve yourself, you're attacked. But Nietzsche shows another way: conscious isolation's path, healing disappearance, regenerating absence. Zarathustra retreats because he's given everything possible at that moment. If you feel similarly, if you sense having nothing more to offer right now, meeting air, space, darkness, perhaps this is your call to start. Not from surrender but from clarity, wisdom, because authentic giving only happens when there's an overflowing source behind it. Don't fear disappearing temporarily. Turn off the world. Silence external voices. Listen to what's inside you, even if it frightens you. In this silence resides your real power. In it, you understand you don't need constant usefulness to possess value. You exist even when not doing. You're worthwhile even when silent. The virtue that gives isn't behavior, it's a state of being. This state becomes possible only when you break with the idea that you must earn your existence, when you understand there's nothing to prove, that you need nobody's permission to be yourself. True virtue cannot exist without fullness. This represents a radical break from everything you've learned. You've always been taught virtue requires effort, that goodness demands sacrifice, that you must fight impulses, repress desires, swallow anger, stifle will, all for supposed greater good. But Nietzsche reverses everything. He says authentic virtue doesn't come from effort but from excess. It's not built on self-denial but on total self-affirmation. Think of an overflowing cup, a complete human being, connected with their essence, strength, and creation, needs no reasons to give. They give because they cannot contain themselves. This giving has no agenda, no strategy. It's not seeking acceptance or admiration. It simply happens, like the sun, rain, or true creator's art. This requires brutal change in self-perception. If you still think you must strive to be good, you remain trapped. When being is truly full, it doesn't act from obligation but from nature. Nietzsche proposes an ideal of humans who don't live from fear or for reward, who don't submit to traditional morality or react against it childishly. He proposes birthing a new being type, the creator who gives because they're free, acts because they're whole, shines without expecting applause. The path to self-mastery begins with recognizing the trap you've been placed in, the dangerous illusion of imposed virtue. It continues with understanding that authentic power comes not from following others but from becoming sovereign over yourself. In this sovereignty, you discover the virtue that truly gives, the silence that truly speaks, and the freedom that truly liberates.